everybody. Today I wanted to introduce you to some of my favorite plants, my Hoya plants. So I've sort of amassed a small collection of Hoya plants. The first one I bought, I sort of just kind of walked into Home Depot and I saw this really cool looking plant and I bought it. Once I figured out what it was, I wanted more. There's also communities on Instagram that are dedicated to Hoya plants. And so once you start looking at pictures of some of the really beautiful ones, I think that they're really hard to stay away from. So, like I said, Hoya plants are also known as wax plants. There are hundreds of different kinds. Some are really easy to come across. Some are much more rare and harder to find. Most of them are generally vining plants. If they are really happy, meaning they have a lot of light and a fair amount of humidity, then they will flower. And their flowers are really cool looking. They're star-shaped and they're often very fragrant and smell good. So these are also pretty tolerant plants. They prefer to be underwatered versus overwatered, as I think is probably the case for most houseplants. So they can skip a watering or two. Generally, with all plants, you want well-draining soil, and you fertilize them during their growing season, which, from what I have read, Hoyas usually kind of go dormant in the wintertime. But again, it depends on what type of care you're providing them with. If you're providing them with any artificial light, or maybe they are getting enough light, and what type of climate you live in. So all of those things are sort of, depending on where they are. But remember, if they're happy, they'll flower, and the flowers are really cool. So I will show you the ones that I have. So the very first Hoya plant I bought at Home Depot, and it was just labeled as a wax plant. It was one of those angel plants. So this one, I thought for a long time that this was Hoya obovata, which is, again, one of the easier varieties to come by. But I've been looking at it lately, and I've noticed that the leaves are sort of wavy and a little speckled if you look up close. So, and the speckling is sort of silver colored. This plant I have in a darker window, and I think if it was in a brighter area, you'd see more variegation. But anyways, I actually think that this might be a Chelsea Hoya plant. Again, just based on the shape of the leaves and also the variegation. So, like I said, this plant is pretty tolerant of where it is right now. I think it would probably be a bit happier if it was in a brighter area. The other weird thing is it came with this fern growing out of it, and I decided to keep it. I have this thing about ferns. I kind of hate them. I love the way that they look, but I really cannot keep them alive. So this one, I think that this is probably a Boston fern, and when I saw it growing, I just kept it there, and I find it sort of ironic that the only fern I've really been able to care for is an accidental fern. And the fern's actually doing pretty well. There's a new little frond coming up right here. So it will stay for now. I don't know if it will stay forever. But this was the first one I bought. I think it was maybe $14. This one has never flowered, but again, it's kind of in a darker area. And I think it looks really beautiful in a hanging basket. So that's number one. And so after I figured out what that was, I became really obsessed with Hoya carnosa plants, and there's a couple of different varieties. There's Crimson Princess and Crimson Queen. And I'll show you the queen second because she is the queen. So first I'll introduce you to the princess. And so this one, you can see the leaves are a little bit more narrow, and there is some nice variegation. I think that the difference between a Hoya Crimson Princess versus Queen is that on the princess, the variegation is in the middle of the leaf, but I could be wrong about that. So this plant is doing pretty good. I don't remember where I got it. It's also probably not getting enough light. You can see that there's actually, I'm wondering if part of it has reverted, either that or there's a different plant in here, but probably it's just not getting enough light. So I think, I've been thinking about moving it to a brighter area, and I think that it might encourage a little bit more variegation. But it seems pretty happy overall. I just trimmed it back before I showed you because I kind of ignore this plant a little bit. But it's vining, it's doing pretty good. I think I've had this one for about 2 years. Now, the queen try not to gasp. This is the Crimson Queen. And I found this at my local garden center last summer, and I stopped in my tracks and I bought it, and I have been super excited about it ever since. I keep it in a full sun window, which is probably why it's doing so well. And so you can see that the variegation on these leaves is on the outside of the leaves. And there's also leaves that are fully white or cream colored. And some of the newer growth is pink. So, and that is why it's my favorite plant, because there's pink on it. This one was actually flowering when I got it. I have since cut the flowers off, but they say that with Hoyas, if you see these long stems coming out, that's usually a sign it might flower soon. This is probably the only Hoya that's in an appropriate lighting situation, but it's doing really, really, really well. One thing that I've read that I'll tell you is that if you see these white leaves, you might actually want to think about cutting them off. But it depends on the rest of the plant. And the rationale behind that is, so there's no chlorophyll in the white leaves. And chlorophyll, as you may or may not know, is what the plant needs to photosynthesize energy. So if you have mostly white leaves, then the plant might not be getting enough energy. And that actually applies to all variegated plants. Sometimes variegated plants tend not to do well because there's not enough chlorophyll to manufacture the energy that they need. So, I love the white leaves on this one, and I think that there's plenty of green leaves to photosynthesize, and the plant seems to be really happy. So I really love this one, the Queen. So my next one is kind of a trendy little house plant. I bought this, I think, on Etsy. I think it was kind of pricey for a plant, but this is a Hoya carrii, and sorry if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. But you'll see these, so you can see that the leaves are sort of heart-shaped. Some people will sell them just a single leaf in dirt, and that's it. And I think those are pretty cool too, but I really wanted one that will vine. So I bought this one, and like I said, I spent a little more money on it than I would have if I had just bought a single leaf. But these plants, if they're happy, and I need to find a spot where this one will be happy, they look really cool if you can train them up a trellis. I just got this one. It came to me in pretty good shape. Ultimately, that's my goal, but I think first and foremost, I need to find a spot where it will get enough light. This plant loves light. All Hoyas love light, really, but they are kind of tolerant of lower light conditions. But if you put them in the right conditions, then they will probably, take your breath away. So this one is pretty cool, Hoya carrii, I think. And this one I showed you in my last video, but this is a Hoya macrophylla variegata, and you can see that the leaves on this one are much bigger, and there's some really cool veining on it and some variegation around the outside of the leaves that is a little pink in some areas. So just ignore this leaf here. So this plant I saw online and I had to have it, so I bought it, and I got a pretty good one from Etsy maybe. And we'll see how it goes. I see a little bit of yellowing on this leaf, and I don't know if that's just stress from shipping or, I really haven't watered it, so I don't think it could be overwatered. But we'll see. I'll give it a good shot. I'm running out of room here. So I'll show you this little one. Maybe we'll start with the other one, actually. So this one I bought a couple of months ago. This one is called a Hoya Rebecca. And this plant, I guess, it will grow really fast. It will trail really quickly. When it's happy, it will have like a reddish coloration on the leaves. So I didn't buy this one too long ago. There seems to be some new growth up here. I should probably repot it. But it seems to be pretty happy. The new growth looks really good. And the pictures I've seen are super beautiful. So when I bought that plant from somebody on Etsy, and I forget who, she also sent me this little gift plant. And there's a tag on it that says Hoya Sunrise. And I haven't really been able to find much on the internet. But now that I think about it, I might have been Googling Hoya Sunset. So anyways, it's just this little vine. It looks like she has rooted it and I just have it in some water. You can see the tiny little roots there. And so I'm just going to keep it in water till the roots look a little stronger. And maybe I can pot it and we'll see how it goes. But this was a nice, pleasant little surprise, but I don't really know much about it. Now the last one that I have is called a Hoya curtisi. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm probably not, but it's also known as a tiny leaf porcelain flower. So this one, I mean, it's obviously there are tiny leaves. There's some silver coloration on the vines. This one, I recently moved to a brighter area, but it was actually pretty happy in a north-facing window, but I just decided to move it. I really like how it trails and the vines come down, so I moved it in an area where I would be able to look at it more. I don't really know too much about this plant, but it does seem to be pretty happy. I hope it I mean, I'm sure it does flower. It's called a porcelain flower. So, but I wish it luck, and I'll give it a chance. So those are the ones that I have, and I am running out of room for plants, so I might not get any more, but if I come across some special ones, then I don't know if I'll be able to resist. One that I have been looking at is the Hindu rope plant, and so they kind of have like curled leaves. Again, they vine. There's a variegated form that I guess sometimes if you're really lucky, people have found them at big box stores. So I don't know, but you can certainly find them on the internet. But I've been trying to sort of stop buying plants. So wish me luck. But so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. If you have a personal favorite Hoya, then I'd love to hear about it. And I'd love to hear about any tips or tricks that you have in keeping them healthy. So I hope you enjoyed. Take care. Bye.